Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, hoodlers, shills, desolate sirs, peasants, vassals, international motherfuckers. I'm a useful idiot, and good morning to everyone. So when I woke up this morning, first thing I thought of was the IMF. And the IMF are not really on the radar right now, but they should be because they're pretty much somewhat involved in all these different regions in the world that certainly I'm talking about on a regular basis, areas like the Middle East and Africa and such. So they operate behind the scenes, so we don't really hear that much about them, and except for stories here and there. Of course, the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, has been under fire for inappropriate behavior, and the IMF recently came out and admitted they might have screwed up on the Greece bailout deal. But the situation with the IMF is a lot more complex and interesting than that. So we're going to have a fairly long video today about the IMF because I want everybody to understand just exactly what they are and how we have another instrument of broke countries bailing out other broke countries. And we also have a blueprint for a form of global governance. The IMF is at the heart of some of these trade agreements that are so detrimental to sovereignty around the globe. And then just the fact that the IMF is a vehicle by which corporations extract wealth, either assets in fire sales, in collapsing economies in Europe, or extracting resources at the barrel of a gun in Africa. So anyway, let me go through some of the gruesome details, I like to say. And one reason why I decided to do a video about the IMF, or the international motherfuckers, as I like to call them, is the fact that they're involved in 41 countries now. So out of somewhere in the vicinity of 200 countries in the world, 190. 41 of them are on the hook to the IMF. And I was also struck by the fact that a lot of these loans have only been set up in the last 3 or 4 years. So this is a recent phenomenon that the IMF is involved in so many different countries. And in fact, let me read off a list of the countries they are involved in right off the bat so you get a picture. And you'll notice that a lot of them are focused in Africa, so this also ties in with the new commercial interest in Africa. So we have Antigua and Barbuda, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Georgia, Jordan, Kosovo, Romania, the Armenian Republic, Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Colombia, Mexico, Poland, Morocco, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Benin, Burkina Faso, Burundi, the Solomon Islands, Ukraine, Cyprus, Central African Republic, Comoros, Ivory Coast, Gambia, Guinea, Haiti, Kenya, Kyrgyzstan, Lesotho, Liberia, Malawi, Mauritania, Niger, Sierra Leone, and Tanzania. And all these loans were set up between 2009 to 2012, so after the collapse, and in a 3-year period. And of course, one of the problems we have here is that this IMF represents 180 member countries created in 1945 at the end of World War II to help reconstruction globally. And the 5 largest contributors are the United States at near 17%, Japan at 6.2%, Germany at 5.8%, France at 4.3%, and the UK at 4.3%. So all these countries, except for Germany, are broke. And yet we're filtering money, huge amounts of money, through this organization, the IMF, money that we borrow from somebody else to give to these countries. And in fact, since 1950, Africa alone has received $300 billion in IMF loans. So, and that's just Africa. And that's money from U.S. taxpayers and taxpayers around Europe. And in fact, just this week, we have a pending IMF loan for Egypt, which is in jeopardy now. One of the reasons why they have a problem characterizing whether this is a coup or not for United States purposes, because if a military coup technically took place, then the United States is not allowed to give aid to this new government. And that would be a $4.8 billion loan, and on top of $10 billion loans from other donors. And then this week, Pakistan also arranged for a $5.3 billion loan / bailout, and it's going to be at least $5.3 billion. So there's another $10 billion coming from the United States, Japan, Germany, France, UK, our taxpayers, or rather money being borrowed from China to filter through the IMF to give to Pakistan and Egypt. And just like all the other countries, Egypt would be required to raise taxes and phase out fuel subsidies, which, of course, in the climate they're having right now would not go over too well. And in fact, these are some of the things that the IMF requires when they give a country a loan. So we've all heard about how the IMF creates austerity, demands austerity for countries that it is dealing with to get loans. And in fact, recently Greece was put on alert that they had 3 days to meet certain requirements, or the next round of bailouts would not be available to them. So there's another good example how the IMF is involved in all these activities. So now in Pakistan, in Greece, and in Egypt, they are a key player in these activities. So once again, this is why this is relevant. So we have, these are some of the conditions for structural adjustment for IMF loans, and they are cutting expenditures, also known as austerity, focusing economic output on direct exports, resource extraction, devaluation of currencies, trade liberalization, lifting export and import restrictions, opening domestic stock markets, direct foreign investment, removing price controls and subsidies, balancing budgets and spending levels, privatization and divestiture of all or part of state-owned enterprises, changing laws to enhance the rights of foreign investors, improving governance, fighting corruption, increasing taxes, and lowering the corporate tax rate. So that is just like a wish list for corporate America all the way down the line. And cutting down on all public services and resource extraction is at the heart of this. Trade liberalizations, and making it easier for all the big investors to come into these countries and basically extract resources without any regulations and with huge profits. So that's what this is all about. And but there's a lot of moral hazards that go along with this IMF agenda, because of course the IMF has no problem supporting military dictatorships, and they also support policies that distort food prices that push millions into starvation and poverty. And they also have the IMF also supports policies which cause massive unemployment and undermine labor laws. And we can see from the list I just read off why that would be. Public health systems become undermined under IMF conditions. And the policy encourages undermining of environmental rules as well. So we have what's called a debtocracy with the IMF holding all the strings. And as I pointed out earlier, too, I mean, that's just an example of the hazards of working with the IMF. We now have Greece barely meeting conditions for these entire last 5 years and enjoying the greatest depression Greece has ever experienced. And then we have talk about Italy heading for a massive EU IMF bailout sometime in the next 6 months. We'll see what that happens. And the IMF helped bail out Spain's banking system recently. And all these countries, once they accept IMF help, of course, it's extremely difficult to extract oneself. And these countries will be under the IMF boot for some years to come. And this goes hand in hand, like I say, with all the trade agreements, particularly the new ones being written up in the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership and then the Transatlantic Trade Partnership that are being set up under Obama. And this conditionality, all this list of requirements that must be met, undermine domestic political institutions and strip countries of their assets. So It's just the kind of ploy that politicians love, too, because they sacrifice in the long term to fulfill some short-term emergency, to put some fire out. So in the meantime, it undermines all the political institutions of these countries and the sovereignty, and their countries get stripped of assets, like Greece is just getting stripped dry right now. So Charles Gerber once wrote that these interacting institutions create a new global power system where sovereignty is globalized, taking power and constitutional authority away from nations and giving it to global markets and international bodies, unquote. And this includes the IMF as well as the World Trade Organization and the World Bank. And that's what these entities are for, a quasi government for corporate globalization. And this is one of the hazards we have in globalization, and that's what all these free trade agreements are all about. And that's why we see all the labor forces shifting out of the United States and over into Southeast Asia and China, and then labor is shifting from China to cheaper places like Bangladesh. And these are all the things that go along with globalization. And the IMF, supposedly created to address these problems, only exploits them and exacerbates them. And globalization has three components. And that's the global financial markets, the transnational companies, and the linked national governments. So once again, it makes it clear why through globalization and this move towards fascism and socialism, we have a combination, like I've talked on many, many occasions, this corporate government partnership. And globalization is the epitome of that, and the IMF is the epitome of that. With global financial markets, transnational companies, and linked national governments all becoming one and acting in harmony. So we had global deregulation during the Clinton years, laws that limited foreign ownership of banks, and those were gutted, and then deregulated currency exchange to eliminate restrictions on investment withdrawals in some of these volatile developing markets. So once again, we have this policy crossing president after president, Congress after Congress, administration after administration, parliament after parliament. So once again, lock stock for the police and surveillance state, and also for serving their corporate and banker masters. And that's what the IMF is all about. And they have a whole series of agreements that they can make in order to facilitate whatever sort of bailout the country needs. So they have standby arrangements, extended arrangements, flexible credit lines, precautionary and liquidity lines, extended credit facilities, and standby credit facilities. So these 41 countries, they all line up under one of those different categories. And the IMF says that lending arrangements which are similar to a line of credit are approved by the IMF Executive Board to support a country's adjustment program. The arrangement requires the member to observe specific terms in order to be eligible to receive a disbursement. And that's how they do it up. It's that conditionality again. And they can find any sort of category to put any country that comes and asks for a bailout. They have a place for them. And so there we have a look at the IMF, where they are in the world today, what they represent, and how they operate, and why they are always an element in these stories that unfold every day. And if that's not enough, the fact that their headquarters is in Washington, D.C., that tells us a lot about what their agenda is and what piece of the puzzle they are really contributing to. So, I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too. And remember, if I agreed with you, then we'd both be wrong.